So now that we're done with our check for understanding, we're going to end up having to hide it so we can work on the things underneath it. To hide it, simply click on the eye here. You're going to open up the thing that says main activity. You're going to see a logo and some leaves. Your task today is to non-destructively make it look like some of these leaves are in front of the logo and some of them are still behind. We're going to use masks for that. In order to do this well, I would kind of recommend to add a mask first. So I'm going to activate my logo layer, just add a mask. It's the fourth button here with the square and the circle. We're not going to need the mask yet, but we will soon. Next thing I would recommend is clicking on the actual thumbnail of the layer and just lowering the opacity. The opacity is right up here. It's at 100%, meaning you could see 100%. But let's lower it just so we can see underneath it while we work. We'll put that back later. Next thing we really want to consider is where would leaves overlap this logo in an organic way on this picture. So I would recommend kind of zooming in a bit. And if you look through here, I can kind of see some areas where maybe a leaf would look really nice overlapping the logo. I kind of like this one right here. In total, you're going to try for 3 or 4 leaves, so you have some options here. We're not going to tell you where. Just try to be intuitive about where the logos and the leaves overlap. Now, in order to select a leaf, in order to do this effect, you need to be on the leaves layer. So I'm going to activate my leaves layer, and then I'm going to consider what selection tool would make the most sense to use to select an individual leaf. Now, since every leaf is green, the magic wand tool probably is not the best. I will warn you that no matter what selection tool you use, you're going to have to fix the selection after you make it. For example, if I start off with the object selection tool and I try to get like a chunk of the leaf, I might get pieces. I'm not going to get everything. I can keep adding, but I'm going to have to spend quite a few minutes making a good selection. And that's just the nature of the game, so be patient with this. If you use the quick selection, you might have to add to that selection as well. It's not going to be a perfect selection your first go. Now, oftentimes what happens, I'm going to zoom in a little closer, you can see, the quick selection is a little too sensitive and it reads too many pixels or not enough. What I often do is I start off with a decent selection. This is not the worst, but it's definitely not enough to do this right. And now I just want to use other selection tools to clean up the edges, and that's a good technique to get. So you can use the magnetic lasso, the regular lasso if you have a fairly steady hand, and you either want to click this second button here, which means add to your selection, or you want to subtract depending on what you need. So I need to add certain sections here, but then subtract maybe this section right here until I have a good selection. So I'm going to speed up this next part, but I'm going to spend a few minutes making sure my selection is perfect. Now, once I'm fairly happy with my selection, you saw that I tweaked it. I spent a few minutes making it perfect. I even went and modified it and smoothed it out a bit. I'm going to zoom out. And what I want to do is be on the layer mask now. So I made the selection on the leaves layer. I'm going to swap back over, but I'm going to make sure I activate the mask, not the layer itself. Please be sure you do that. Next, if we talked about how black conceals and white reveals, what we want to do is conceal part of this Instagram logo. So we want to fill that selection with the color black. This will only work if you're on your mask though. Next thing we want to do is add black to our selection. So if we go to our gradient tool and we hit the paint bucket tool, we make sure we are with black, and then we just simply click here. What should happen, it should look like suddenly the leaf popped out in front of us. I'm going to kind of zoom in here. And what that shows you is that this part of the Instagram logo has been concealed, which is why you can see through it to the background. So let's bring the opacity up just to make you be able to see this a little better. Okay? Now, you can kind of clean up your selections. If you find that it's not enough, you can take a brush and clean up the edges, and I can show you how to do that. So I'm going to deselect now that I have a decent selection there. And you see how some of the edges look a little jagged? Well, because I'm using a mask, I can use black paint to soften the edges, or even white paint. So the way you do this is you still make sure you're on your layer mask. You can take your paintbrush, and you're going to make sure you have a very soft brush. See where it says hardness up here, the setting where there's drop down arrow? Hardness deals with how hard the edges of your brush are. The softer the brush, the more like faded it looks on the edges. Now, if you paint with black, you're going to conceal parts of this logo. But if you paint with white, you're going to reveal. It's up to you how much of the selection you want to conceal or reveal. I'm going to make my brush slightly larger. I'm just going to paint over the edges. And you're going to see what this does. It really softens the edge of my leaf, so it looks a little bit more, I don't know, like a smoother transition between the Instagram logo and the leaf itself. And all I'm doing is painting with black on my mask so that it conceals a little bit more of that logo with the softer edge. It also makes it look more like it has shadow. That's exactly what you're going to do for each leaf. Every time you get to a new leaf, remember this step. Activate the leaves layer, zoom in and figure out what leaf you want to overlap what part of the Instagram logo. I would recommend lowering the opacity of the Instagram logo or simply hiding it while you work, whichever you prefer. When you make your selection, you're on your leaves layer, you use the selection tool you think works best with the given leaf, then you go back to your layer mask and fill it with black. I'm going to speed that up one more time just so you can see it. Now once you're done making at least four leaves look like they're in front of your shape, you can save this as a JPEG and upload. Mr. Tron and I would love to see progress pictures, especially after you do your first leaf, to ensure that you're doing this correctly. Another thing we're going to want to see is that you have your layers panel. So as part of your assignment today, when you're completed, not only are you giving us the JPEG of this file, you're going to take a screenshot of your layers panel. You can simply make a screenshot of the layers panel like this and add it to your assignment. This is going to show us that you did this non-destructively and that you used the technique talked about in class. Be patient with your selections and follow the instructions carefully. You'll end up with a really beautiful effect at the end. Good luck.